When the iPhone was first being developed, this is 20 years ago, it was an incredibly secretive process. And one of the lead designers for the iPhone, he would test it. Their beta testing was testing it while driving on a highway and making sure you could text. Their testing of the iPhone was on a 2-year-old to make sure the swipe to unlock function was easy enough.
Right.
And this is what we're up against, what we're dealing with.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Frum Health Club Podcast. I'm your host, Mendel Krashunsky. Here at the Frum Health Club, we believe that health isn't separate from our Yiddishkeit, it's all part of it. When we strengthen our health and our well-being, we become better able to serve Hashem, our families, and our communities with energy and joy. Today, we're diving into a different kind of health, the health of our attention, our focus, our presence, and our relationship with technology. We're joined by Richard Simon, who is the Director of Digital Strategy at Georgetown Law, and also the author of the powerful and eye-opening book, Unplug, How to Break Up with Your Phone and Reclaim Your Life. Richard did something very unique. He turned off his smartphone and lived for an entire year without it. No apps, no constant messaging, no social media, and no notifications stealing his life one tap at a time. During that year, he began also interviewing a wide range of people whose lives and performance radically changed once they reset their relationship with their phones. His research includes conversations with psychologists, educators, CEOs, teens, parents, and even an MLB All-Star Nick Castellanos, who credits ditching his smartphone with helping him become one of the best hitters in baseball. Richard's work uncovers how phones are rewiring our brains, harming our presence, draining our productivity, and affecting our emotional, relational, and overall well-being. Today, through his book, he helps people rethink how they use their phones so they can be calmer, more intentional, and more connected to what truly matters. Richard, welcome to the Frum Health Club Podcast.
Mendel, thank you so much for having me on. It's great to be here.
Take us back to the moment that you realized, that your phone is controlling you more than you're controlling it.
Yeah, that's a good question. I always had some tension with my phone, even when I had a basic phone, like before I got my first smartphone in 2010. Like I definitely acknowledged, like, this is when, before I was married, before I had kids, I remember like going on dates and going out with friends, and even in college being like in the dorm playing video games or being in the dining hall. And even with basic phones, we all had them at the table. It was very much, on our minds. But yeah, when the smartphone came into the picture in 2010 for me, I was a young professional, still single, and it was a bit unsettling. And I recognized this very, very early on. Like I took the train, I still do, from Baltimore to DC. And I used to be a prolific reader, and then all of a sudden the smartphone comes into the mix. I'm literally just doom scrolling for like the entire hour. It ranged from blogs to social media, to internet browsing, whatever it might be. So fast forward 6 years, we had our first child, me and my wife, and that's really when I knew there was a really big problem and how things just weren't lining up, because I saw how much it was impacting how much I was present with them. And I could see it in my kids as they were growing older, ultimately, how much the phone was, interrupting just meaningful activities that we really should be enjoying. And things from as basic as doing a puzzle to a presentation at preschool. So I realized that I really wanted to do something about it. So that's why I decided I really need to do something drastic and turn it off.
Wow. Okay. And how did that go? That it's one thing to notice it. The other thing is to go 1 year without it. That's something that many people can't say they did. So if you can share, how did that happen?
Yeah, so something I talk about in my book Unplug is trying these hacks. And many of us are familiar with them. One of the most common hacks that people try, which it's totally noble. In the secular world, it's known as a digital Sabbath. For us, of course, it's Shabbos. Um, and we know how sacred and restorative that time is. But what happens an hour and a half before Shabbos is about to end? ultimately you start to feel that dopamine rush, that
Yeah.
anticipation. What's the first thing everyone does after Havdalah? Adults go right to our smartphones.
Yeah.
And then even Avasubanim or Motzei Shabbos learning at Shul. Shabbos just ended 45 minutes ago. It's a Saturday night at 7:45 at night, and you look around and like the kids, they're learning Mishnayot. It's beautiful, and more than half the parents looking down at their phones. Like this past Saturday night, me and my wife were commenting. She was like, she nudged me, and I looked. I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Almost every adult is like looking down at their smartphones or basic phones because some people have basic phones. It's like, wow, this is crazy. There's nothing going on a Saturday night at 8 o'clock. Like, what's everyone doing? So, Shabbos, I was already doing that and knew that wasn't enough to break the habit. Like telling a cigarette smoker, don't smoke one day a week.
Yeah.
Very noble, but the other 6 days they're just gonna be hacking away. So for Shabbos, that was like my context. Um, Other things, what I call hacks in the book that I tried. I tried the phone foyer method, where you leave it in a specific place in the house plugged in, and it stays there. But I realized how addictive it was because I'd literally be like changing a diaper, and like I would feel the need, the anticipation, the dopamine rush. I'd feel like I like had to check it. So I felt almost like a drug addict, like I had to check it in that one spot, and it didn't help when I left the house. Um, I tried airplane mode. I tried grayscale. Um, I tried all these different like hacks recommended in self-help articles and realized like it wasn't getting me any closer to where I wanted to be. And that's when I realized that ultimately turning it off was what I really needed.
Wow. Wow. Okay. And what would you say surprises you the most during the first, let's say, couple of weeks without the smartphone?
Yeah, so like any behavioral addiction, which is what majority of us have with the smartphone, there's withdrawal. It might sound crazy, but it's really true.
Yeah.
Pretty much everyone I interviewed and profile in my book, and there are about 25 people from all walks of life, felt some form of withdrawal. Now, it could be minor things like, anxiety, to things much more major like sleepless nights, headaches, that kind of stuff. But generally, after the first week or two, it'll go away. So certainly for me, for the first week, I mean, we were on vacation. We were in South Carolina and we were in Disney for my first week that I had my phone off. So you think even on vacation that I would be like okay with it, like I'm not connected with work or anything like that. But even with all my preparation for the 2 months leading up to my year long phoneless odyssey, I really struggled with it. I mean, the first day I remember having to drive to the grocery store, this Harris Teeter in Isle of Palms, South Carolina, and it was like 8 minutes away from our resort. And my wife, like, she wrote out the directions on a piece of paper. And I was scared. Like, I was legitimately scared. Like, I got to the store. This is winter time, even in South Carolina. It was chilly. And like my back is like sweaty as can be. Like like my palms are sweaty because like I was just used to this voice just taking me to all these places for the last 12, 13 years since I started using GPS. And even at the grocery store, once again, it's a totally little thing, but I remember waiting in line and there were a few people that were in front of me. It was like late at night and like there's only one cashier and I had nothing to do. Like, and I didn't know what to do with myself. Like my natural reaction every time this would happen before, whether it be in a doctor's
Yeah.
waiting room, whether it would be waiting in carpool, whatever it would be, it would always be to take my phone out. And I all of a sudden realized like, oh my gosh, like this is scary. This is frightening. I have to be comfortable enough in my own skin to just look up at the ceiling or the wall in front of me and be okay with boredom. So yeah, the first week was for sure unsettling, but as we'll probably go through in this conversation, you start realizing that with hours of freed up time every day to invest in more meaningful activities, it is unbelievably beautiful, this whole process, and empowering.
Wow. Wow. Okay, that's very special. What were some, like you mentioned, there's a lot of more time now. Like, what were some maybe new habits or things that you started to do to replace the screen time?
Yeah, so me and my wife, like I talk about in the book, the importance of like sort of creating a menu. Create categories in terms of activities that really mean the most to you. So things could be professional in terms of development. It could be more community based. It could be more physical in terms of your physical health. Um, Figure out what those categories are in terms of what means most to you, and then fill those buckets. The average American spends more than 5.5 hours a day on their smartphone. Um, you're all of a sudden, by turning your smartphone off, going to have hours of freed up time you didn't have before. So if there's a book club that you wanted to join that you weren't doing before, you can join. If there's a Tanya share that you were thinking about, like, you know what, maybe I should do. Well, that could be something you add to your list. Put it up on your refrigerator. Make it so there's accountability. If you're living by yourself, create a shared Google Doc among your friends. Make sure there's accountability. And when you have all that free time, pick something off that menu and invest in it. So for me personally, there were a number of activities. I mean, first and foremost, what I really cared most deeply about was relationships. So with my wife, I really wanted during the evening time, we always used to be on screens together. That was just the default activity. My wife's a pediatrician, I'm in technology, and whenever our kids would go to sleep, our devices would be on and we'd be present together, but not really present. And we just really wanted to invest that time in each other. And that was one thing that I really wanted to focus on because I wanted this process to be not super stressful for her, but also rewarding. Um, and so too with kids. I felt like so often we would like default like to screens, like with our kids. And it's funny me thinking about it now, like now if there's ever like a moment like where kids doing a puzzle or kids reading like in our reading corner, like I always go over. Whereas before, I really think I would have been on my phone. Like I'm like
Wow.
convinced that would be the case. But I think relationships were a biggie, and then it reset a lot of like my relationships with the friends that I care most deeply about. I used to text with them like all the time. Like I would have 40 or 50 friends that I would text with regularly, throughout the year. But it wasn't anything deep. It wasn't anything meaningful. It was just something I talk about in the book. Is I was just embracing connection, not actual conversation.
Wow.
So what happened with my phone off? Many of those relationships, they fizzled in the sense that we weren't texting. Um, but for my 3, 4, just friendships I hold dearest, that I cherish the most, we've never been closer. So like even to this day, like some of these relationships are long distance. We set aside time to talk for hours on the phone. Um, you know, Things
Wow.
we weren't doing before, where we were just sending each other emojis and just like ridiculous texts that had really no meaning about sports or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And now, even if it's just let's say once every 3, 4 weeks, we'll talk for like 2 or 3 hours, and that
Wow.
is such amazing time.
Yeah. Yeah. So something I really loved about your book, as I was mentioning before we started the podcast, right after I saw the Living L'chaim interview, I bought the book right away. And something that I really liked about it is that it gives you a lot of different options of what you can choose, and it gives you also a lot of people that you interview with like absolutely different backgrounds, and some people like highly, dependent on technology, meaning like their work or whatever it is, but they still make it work. One of them, of course, that really stood out was the MLB All-Star. If you could share, what about his story stood out the most, but also just like that experience of interviewing him and his story.
Yeah, yeah. So Nick Castellanos, it's one of my favorite stories in the book. Just your background. I mean, he was drafted by the Tigers, and he spent his like first like 7 years like in the organization, and he did great. I mean, at one point they even traded him to the Cubs because they were in contention. And when he became a free agent, he signed a deal with the Cincinnati Reds. But in 2020, uh, during the pandemic, it was a shortened season, and just like pretty much all of us, I mean, our lives were really upended. And Nick, he really struggled on the field and off the field in terms of focus. So he's a very introspective person, and when he was reflecting on his 2020 year, he was thinking about so many of the different stress points. So much of it ultimately came back to his use of his smartphone. He after games he'd spend so much time looking at you know who's talking about his swing, who's talking about his game, how they're doing in the standings, how his team's doing. He'd be on social media, He'd be in the fantasy football, he'd be in the group chats, and it's just like there wasn't time to like unwind. And certainly in terms of his wife, in terms of his at the time I think it was his girlfriend, fiance, and also his child, he just didn't have a level of focus like he wanted in terms of his life. So he said, you know what? I'm just gonna go cold turkey. And I mean, Nick, obviously, as an MLB player, is worth a lot of money. But it shows like he went to the store to get a flip phone, and he went to get, like I talk about in the book, many people, whether it's a physical SIM card or an eSIM card, they will keep the same number when they go from their smartphone to their basic phone, which I think is the easiest. But for Nick, he said, no, I'm literally going to go cold turkey and I'm getting a
Wow.
completely new number. Um, and he realizes when he's at spring training for the Cincinnati Reds that like he has a focus that he's never had before, from training with box jumps to a focus in the outfield in terms of making plays and at the plate that he never had before.
Wow.
And he's got this energy. It's crazy. So like you can watch this online. His second game of the season, it was against the St. Louis Cardinals, and the day before, I think he had a home run, and then the next day he did a bat flip with the home run.
Mhm.
And I guess the Cardinals might have taken a bit of offense to this, and they pegged him. They hit him in the next game, and he walks over to the pitcher, shows him the ball. He's like, "You want the ball?" Like sort of like tormenting him a bit, and goes to first base. There's a base hit. He rounds second. He rounds third. He goes home. He slides in, and he's standing over this pitcher from the Cardinals, Jake Woodford. He's standing over him, flexing his muscles. The bench is clear. There's an all-out brawl on the field, and he ends up getting suspended for instigating for like a few games. But this was like this fire from the field that he didn't
Wow.
have before.
Wow.
Anyway, he leads the league in home runs the first half of the season, leads the league in hits. He ends up winning the Silver Slugger Award, and he starts in the All-Star game. It was his first All-Star game for the Cincinnati Reds in 2021. And so much of it, he points to the decision to go to a basic phone. He told me about, this is probably one of the things that stuck out most to me, was he said, before, like I talked about earlier, he would be so into fantasy football and memes and who swings this way and that and social media. So what did his nighttime ritual look like after games? He said he'd go back to his home, he'd ignite a fire, his fireplace, he'd put on some classical music, some piano, he'd get a glass of wine, he'd kick back, and he told me I would just be. And he's like, Richard, it sounds like a little thing. Like it really sounds really little, but you have no idea what that did for my mental health. And I thought that was, so powerful, because so often, we go through stressful moments, we have stressful days. Certainly for Nick, I mean, like being in the
Mhm.
limelight like he was that season, I mean, he was always, seeking so much attention in terms of interviews. He's known as the best interview in baseball. So, I mean, everyone wants his opinion. Everyone's talking about how well he's doing. He's batting 350. He's leading the league in hits, like all this stuff. No, he just blocked all that out, and he just sat by his fire and just reflected. And I think it's such a powerful lesson for so many of us, whatever our stresses are during the day, or even our successes that we have. We need time to reflect on that. We need to give our minds that space. So at any rate, that was one of my favorite parts of the Nick story.
Wow. Amazing. Truly amazing. Could you share with us what's happening with the brain, when we're constantly checking our phones?
Yeah, so dopamine is one of the most powerful molecules in the brain, and a lot of people think that the dopamine, it spikes the most when we ultimately like tap like various icons. So there's like, actually, it's the anticipation where really you see the biggest dopamine spike. Like, oh my gosh, like we think about it after Shabbos when we turn it on. What
Mhm.
kind of messages are going to come in? We feel like we have to be like members of the Knesset. Like what's going to happen? Like what is going to? No. Like it's not that. But no, that's how we're wired. Like what's going to be the latest news alert? What kind of text messages, phone calls, WhatsApp messages, social media alerts, whatever it is. Like there's that anticipation. So there's dopamine spikes, and there is certainly a release when we check the phone, and that feels good. But ultimately, there's also that reward pathway where like you feel that feeling of that dopamine release, and you want to keep on doing it over and over again, which is why many of us are checking it hundreds of times, no exaggeration, like throughout the day. Um, and then in terms of the engagement piece too, there's also the Russian roulette, certainly the slot machine piece of, okay, if I click on this icon or tap on this icon, like what am I going to see? So there's also an anticipation there. So like one of the screen addiction specialists I talked to in the book, who spoke about crack cocaine and how ultimately, with cocaine, um, highly addictive and definitely operating, definitely the reward pathways are really rushing. But with crack cocaine, it was about getting that hit faster. And certainly with a
Mm.
smartphone, that's ultimately what's happening, especially with at each new iteration in terms of speed, in terms of when you ultimately turn your phone on or when you tap your phone, it becomes more and more like frictionless. Um, yeah, it's incredibly potent, and yes, it's very problematic in terms of wanting to achieve any sort of calm and focus throughout the day.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I wanted also to ask about the term attention residue because a lot of people think, I'm just checking here and there. It's not really affecting me, but there's the concept, right, of attention residue that it actually like, that it affects you throughout the day or
Yeah, yeah. Deep Work is one of my favorite books. It's by someone actually blurbed my book, Cal Newport, um, and the cornerstone of that philosophy in terms of depth and focus is that there aren't interruptions. So this could be writing a legal brief or writing a piece of computer code. When you are focused and it has your full attention, you're able to really accomplish great things. But if you ultimately have a text message come through, or it doesn't have to be a text message, it could be even an email alert on your computer. Even that brief context switch is what you're referring to in terms of the attention residue. And it's incredibly difficult then to get yourself back on track. Something I talk about in the book is really the power of deep work and ultimately what you can accomplish. But a prerequisite really for accomplishing deep and focused work and really the art of concentration is really removing the smartphone from the mix. One of the attention experts I talked to in the book, he's one of the foremost. He's based in the Netherlands. He told me, he said, if you're going on a diet and you have a tray of cookies or a jar of cookies right next to your computer, just by lack of willpower, you're going to have one of those cookies. And so, too, in terms of deep focus and deep work, if you have a smartphone by your computer or by your workstation, it just, you're going to check it because just by a lack of willpower. Yeah, that's the attention residue piece that we really want to try and avoid when we're accomplishing deep work.
yeah. So how does someone know that they're being controlled by their phone? It seems like a lot of people are pretty, oblivious to it. And I honestly could say I was also, before reading the book, I had no idea I was spending 6 hours a day on the phone. A friend of mine that I actually also got into the book, and he's really been enjoying it, and he's making steps already. He showed me a screenshot. I was shocked. Like I couldn't believe it. It was 14 hours a day. I like, I don't understand how that's possible, but yeah. How does someone understand that they've been, hijacked by their phone?
Yeah, I think screen time is really one of the most helpful pieces, because ultimately, I never make the argument in the book to not own a smartphone because
Yeah.
I still own one. My argument is at the end of the day, you want to be able to account for that time. This is like sort of like Musser. This is like what like I learned like when we're doing my Piaget's like truly like our time on this earth. It's a finite, non-renewable resource. So when you start accounting for your time and realizing that you're losing time on this earth, you're like, what am I doing? And that's like the biggest wake up call. Like you mentioned your friend. Like I have plenty of people I interviewed for the book. Like I have someone in the book who was spending, I don't know, it was 14, I think it was 13 hours a day. He was a minister. He's based in Colorado. And that was such a wake up call for him. It's like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, like this is insane. So
Yeah.
ultimately what we want is if you're, for example, in your case, spending 6 hours a day, 4 hours a day, whatever it might be on your smartphone, and you look at your screen time and you're like, what did I do with my day? Like, I can't account for this time. Then that's where you really need to do something transformative. But
Hmm.
let's say, for example, you look down at your phone. And this is what we want ultimately at the end of the process. You look down at your phone at the end of the day and you see, let's say, an hour and 20 minutes. And you see, okay, 45 minutes of that was spent catching up with my mom who lives overseas. 30 minutes of that was listening to a shear while I was doing the dishes. And 5 minutes of that was texting, just coordinating like with my spouse in terms of pickup for the kids. I'd say after that, fantastic. Like you're using like the phone like really the way you should. But
Yeah.
unfortunately for most of us, like we can't account for that time. And I think that's where the biggest problem is.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I have another friend that he told me, like I also was sharing with him about your book. He told me he got into a car accident because he was not a crazy car accident, but he got into a car accident because he was scrolling on Instagram and he just could like and after he's like, that's it. Like I realized I'm addicted to this. I'm literally addicted to this. I don't think people quite understand the amount of tremendous amounts of money that's being invested to get them hooked on this, on social media, on the phones, and everything. Um, and I heard something really funny that like all these social media places, they're all free. Why are they free? Because you're the product.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's so true. Yeah, and a lot of people really don't get it.
Yeah, I mean the when the iPhone was first being developed, this is 20 years ago, it was an incredibly secretive process. And one of the lead designers for the iPhone, he would test it. Their beta testing was testing it while driving on a highway and making sure you could text. Their testing of the iPhone was on a 2-year-old to make sure the swipe to unlock function was easy enough. And
Right.
this is what we're up against, what we're dealing with.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. So I wanted to ask a couple of like subjects about health, as you know, this is the From Health Club podcast, and this all really ties into it. But how does smartphone overuse affect things like sleep, stress, and energy?
Yeah, there's lots of studies, scientific studies regarding sleep. Certainly in terms of the blue light, the lights that are emitted in terms of melatonin, and going to anxiety, things that are anxious, things that can really, um, get you riled up, before sleep. So yeah, there's plenty of science regarding screens before sleep. So that's where what I really recommend as one of the strategies when you're going through this phone breakup is to really optimize your home environment, which is that when you're ultimately figuring out your house, you want to make sure screens stay out of your bedroom because that ultimately signals to your brain and to your spouse that this is a place for sleep. So too with the kitchen, it signals to your brain and to your family this is a place for eating. So too, like a den or a living room area, this signals to everyone in the house this is a place for high quality leisure activities. So certainly in terms of sleep, I think it is absolutely imperative that screens never come into the bedroom for you and your spouse or for children for sure.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And right now, I think like there's such incredible amounts of people with anxiety and all these issues. It also probably has a big connection to the way we're using technology or overusing technology.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, this is where the embracing solitude and embracing boredom, like the Nick Castellanos story, is
Hmm.
so important. I spoke to communications historians leading up to the publication of the book, and there have been so many moral panics about other forms of technology, from from radio to television to even comic books. Um, and there were hearings on Capitol Hill here in the states about comic books and the concern about their prevalence. But what makes this moment so different? And what makes it so different is this is the first time in humanity where we just can't be alone with our own thoughts. And I think that's really where the anxiety piece comes up. I
Mm,
mean, it's
wow.
very difficult to be, you know, comfortable enough in our own skin to embrace silence and to embrace boredom. But what happens once again when you're at the doctor's office? Everyone's on a phone. What happens when you're in carpool the 5 minutes? You're on your phone. What happens when you're waiting in line at the grocery store those 2 minutes? All right, you're on your phone. Now you might think that those things are little, like very, very little. Like, no, those are actually big
I
because we need to give our mind that space and time to reflect, to process, to even daydream. Like for kids, like, when was the last time, like, one of the screen addiction specialists told me, is like, when was the last time you saw kids laying down, like, in the grass and pointing up
know.
at the sky and, like, looking at the clouds and saying, "Oh, it's that animal. No, it's that animal." No, so
Wow.
much of this has become a screen-based childhood, but we as adults, we need that time too. Like, one of
Yeah.
the rituals that I still do to this day, I was doing it last night, and I live in Maryland, and, it's, like, 35 degrees out last night, and I ritualize it. I read on the deck, and after I finish a chapter, I pace. And this comes into the physical health piece. I actually have a rucksack, and sometimes when I pace, I take the
Nice.
rucksack and I'll walk up and down the block like for 5 to 10 minutes, and then I'll go back to reading.
Wow.
I might look ridiculous, 35 degrees with my rucksack, pacing in the same like 5, 6 houses, but, like, that is, like, the time I need, like, for my mind just to, like,
Wow.
reflect on everything that happened throughout the day, and it's incredibly, like, restorative. Um, the constant companion model of the phone has really taken away that piece of being able to give our minds that space, and it's certainly, I think, in terms of the anxiety piece, that is one of the biggest culprits, is that we're not giving our mind the ability to confront those things, those emotions.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. So true. So you mentioned a little bit about, kids also. Like, when was the last time you've seen kids sit on the grass and things like that? I think that's another topic in itself. The amount of like technology that kids have now, um, and I think you really notice it when your kids don't have screens. Something that my wife and I started to do. Our kids are only they're 3 and 4, so but still, like a lot of our friends, they give their kids, these huge iPads, phones, um, and it's definitely like as a parent, it's definitely I think easier in the short term. It's easier to give them an iPad when they're crying, but in the long term, I think there's a lot of things that will cause them to be addicted to these technologies later on, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's a very tricky topic for kids. Fortunately, with where you are and where I am too, my kids are 9, 6, and 3. They are going to be in a great position when they reach middle school, high school, um, because they will have like-minded uh, parents, or they'll have like-minded friends who have parents who will not be giving their kids phones. And that is huge because right now, if you are a parent of a high school age kid,
Mm,
um, and they don't have a smartphone, they will be the only ones.
yeah,
But thanks to the great research of John Haidt, and Anxious Generation, um, ultimately there are more and more parents who have mobilized in terms of schools and at home to just not do this. It's a social experiment that's gone terribly wrong
yeah,
for kids right now who are between like eighth grade and who are like 27, 28 years old. Um, and fortunately, but fortunately for us, there, of course, there will be kids in high school who will have smartphones in 5, 6 years. Definitely. But
yeah,
I feel very confident that 50% and most high schools will either have basic phones or no phones at all. And I think that's going to be a really, really exciting development to see for those of us who are tech conscious and who are concerned.
yeah, yeah, definitely. So another thing that I really loved about your book is that it gives a lot of different approaches. You don't have to go the cold turkey type if you don't want to. But something I want to share with what happened with me, as I mentioned, when I started the book. the screen time was at around 6 hours. And from methods from the book, I don't want to share the methods. If you want to know, you got to buy the book. But some of the methods, it got it down to 1 hour. And then something pretty crazy happened because I was thinking about getting like a basic phone. And my phone, out of nowhere, it broke. Like it broke to a point where there's so much water on it. Like I don't know if that's part of the. I was listening on an audiobook. I don't know if that's part of the process of listening, and then it breaks. Just joking, but yeah, it just broke, and I took it to the store, and they're like, yeah, it's gonna cost more to fix and that. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna give it a try. So for the last month, I've had this phone over here. um, and it's been amazing. Like I definitely feel less stress. I feel overall much more present with my kids, with my family, with my community, with friends and everything. It's just been amazing. Um, and I run a online community, on WhatsApp. So you just got to get creative. And I love that in your book, there's all these different approaches that you can take, and it's really, really impactful. So with that being said, if someone does feel like they are addicted right now, definitely I highly recommend to get your book. But what can they do like right now to just as their first step?
Yeah. Um, so certainly there are a couple of activities I would say right off the bat, which is go for a 45-minute walk, um, without any phone. It could be around your community. It could be if you're at work and you have a lunch break and you're walking around like the office, but don't bring a phone with you. And you might say, what Shabbos? Shabbos like to go for walks, but oftentimes when we're going for Shabbos walks, we're with others. We're
Hmm.
going to a shul. Um, so I would say make it during the week and go for a 45-minute walk without a phone. And most people who've reported back to me, they find it to be very scary. Like I remember one person, this is someone who was from, he said, Richard, I drove to Shul for the first time from Mincha Maariv, and I didn't have my smartphone, and I was freaking out,
Wow.
like completely freaking
Wow.
out. And he's like, and now, like now, I just have it as a practice that I don't, never come to Shul with a phone at all. But go for a walk, and I think that is something that's very, very healthy. And after you get past the first few times, I think you're gonna realize, all right, this is something that's really, really special. And the second is to um, go out to eat with a loved one. This could be a parent, it could be a spouse, it could be a child, and leave your phone behind. And then there's studies that have been done that show even if the phone is off in your backpack and your backpack is next to you in a chair, your mind is still on that
Wow.
phone.
Wow.
Forget about having it. A lot of people, their habit is put it down on the table, and what ends up happening is they put it face down on the table, and then they will still inevitably check it. No, even if it's in your backpack and it's in your bag. I remember that's where Ellie on the Living L'chaim, after that comment, he chucked the phone across the room, like, forget about it. But go out to eat with a loved one and experience that true connection and conversation. And it feels really, really good. So I would say, in terms of a first step, that'll start to give you an idea of how wonderful embracing one of the four breakups in my book is.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Something I just wanted to also mention is that, and I think you also spoke about this in your book, is that once you start doing this, you start to realize and see how many people are just addicted and just on their phones. You go to a restaurant, the whole family is just in their phones. Um, there's a guy in my shul. He literally, like, every time I look at him in shul, he's just like stuck to his phone, scrolling X. And it's like it's just crazy. It really is insane. It's a big problem, but you're definitely doing amazing work to spread awareness about this, and it's impactful. Like I'm saying it for myself.
Yeah,
It works.
I'm so glad. One thing I'll bring up is it's a totally extreme like case study, but I think it's something that could be helpful for listeners. Like I feel like so often like the argument is for not doing something like this is, well, I my job like requires it.
Yeah.
Like I need it like for my professional life. Well, I profile someone in the book who's an on-call anesthesiologist at Johns Hopkins, and you know this is someone who's literally like, it's extreme, but he is saving lives. on a daily basis. And he's got such an interesting setup. So at work, there's no getting around it. Like, he has to have a work smartphone when he's at Hopkins. He needs it to access the emergency medical record system, and he relies on it. But what happens when his shift is done? He leaves it plugged in his office, and he leaves it at Hopkins. He doesn't carry around with him a personal smartphone. Um, and he told the hospital, I want to not have a smartphone. What can I do? Can I have a pager? They said, okay, we'll give you a pager. And he said, no, I just don't want any pager. No. I don't want a two-way pager where, like, you can send a message to the hospital and then I respond. No, I want a one-way pager. And they said, if you want a one-way pager, we'll give you a one-way pager. And he said, Richard, like, you have no idea what this does for me. He said, one, there's the obvious, when, I'm not on call, I'm not fretting about it. Like, I am off. Like, I don't have like a smartphone, I'm not fretting it. But when I am on call, he's like, I'm not that stressed either. And he said there's two pieces to it. One is that there's no context switching. There's no smartphone in the equation. So, like, even if I'm checking if I'm checking my app, I'd be thinking about all the other things, addictive parts of the smartphone. So that's like, that's certainly a big piece. But two is that I can't respond right away. So it gives me 5 to 10 minutes to get
Wow.
to a phone to then call the hospital. I was like, wow. So, like, talk me through that, what that looks like. And he's like, all right. So I go to the grocery store. I go to, here it's Whole Foods. I think you mentioned Whole Foods or whatever. All right. So I go to Whole Foods. I'm on call. I get a call. All right. So I bike back to my house. He's describing how he bikes to the grocery store. He bikes back to his house, and then he responds to that one call message, and he might have to go to the hospital then at that point. Um, and then I said, like, more plainly, all right, what happens if you're, like, on the highway? Like, what would happen? He's like, well, then if my car would break down, I would get off the highway and find the nearest exit. He's like, I'm not a big worrier. I'm like, wow. So, at any rate, if the on-call anesthesiologist at Johns Hopkins Hospital can figure out a way to make it work in terms of separating, which is a big piece, his personal digital footprint from his professional digital footprint, I think anyone can.
100%. Yeah, definitely. Um, do you think that overall society is heading towards a digital collapse or a digital awakening?
Hmm. Depend- in this world, a lot depends on who you ask, because I feel like you hear a lot of scary things when you're on the interwebs on this topic. For me, I definitely feel like I feel more hope, like, overall. I mean, there are hundreds of basic phone models, like,
Yeah,
now. Um, there are so many different options, and I I get so excited because my book was published through a Big Five publisher, and it's most of the audience has been a non-Frum, like, population. Um, I get an email every day, like, at least one email every day from someone around the world reacting to it, and telling me something that they're doing. So, for example, someone emailed me a couple weeks ago saying, "I want to let you know, my husband and I, or my fiance and I, we decided to quit our phones together." That's one of the breakup styles in the book. And we just to let you know, we did a phone-free wedding where everyone, like, had to
wow,
basically check their phones at
wow,
reception
wow,
to go
wow.
in. I was like, "Oh, wow." It's like, and now everyone's like, afterwards, like, "That was amazing," and are asking us stuff, and I'm like, "Oh, that's incredible." In ophthalmology practice, there's 51, 52 of them. They did a bulk book buy my book, and when you get into their office, you have to check your smartphone in at the desk, and it goes into a pouch, and it stays there the entire day. Your smartphone, so they could be more focused with their patients. Um, there's a Frum company based in New York. It's a 1,200 person furniture company, um, and I've been in talks with them, and they told me that smartphones are not allowed on the premises in any meeting or in any work environment,
Wow.
because we want our employees. So, for sure, if you listen to a conversation on a viral podcast about AI and our downfall, you'd be like, oh gosh, like, we are in for something. But no, like you see that there are so many people who are just sick and tired of just always being plugged in and want to live, a deeper and more focused life. So I've been incredibly encouraged and empowered since my book came out in terms of seeing what the reactions have been and how much people are yearning and who are seeking this out.
Yeah, yeah, that's beautiful. And now we also need no phone minions as well. We need to check the phone before we enter the show. I think that would be very good, actually. What's the one message you want every listener to walk away with?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be like this. We get one shot at this life
Yeah,
in terms of in terms of being on this earth. And ultimately, do you want to spend it from 8 to 11 p.m. just doom scrolling? Um, this breaking up with your phone is truly a way to regain time. That's what I felt, and the people who I profiled and the people that I hear about, who are emailing me. I just got an email 2 days ago from someone saying it was 13 hours a day, and now it's two. That
wow.
person just gained 11 hours each day that they didn't have before. So that'll be my big message: is that it doesn't have to be this way.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Richard. It's really been a pleasure and very insightful. And we're gonna, of course, link the book people so people can take a look and purchase it. Um, yeah, it's been amazing. Thank you very much, Richard.
Mendel, thank you so much. Keep up the great work.